right. So this is fun. Sammy's not here today on this episode, but I have a special guest, someone that I've been learning a lot around personal finance from. And I know our last two podcast episodes, we specifically have been talking about money, and we've been talking about the way that it affects our emotions, our mental state, and even just some of the practicals around it. A lot of lessons Sammi and I are learning currently right now. It's a very prevalent topic for both of us. And I think in the spirit of like what we're learning, we've always been, people have been trying to give you current process so that it's vulnerable, it's authentic. It's not just like, gosh, this is the thing that we learned 2 years ago, and so it's easy to talk about. I think we like talking about the things that we currently struggle with, or maybe something that currently feels vulnerable. And we've been going through a lot of, honestly, what feels like financial crises, over the last maybe several months, just like one thing after another that's like really caused us to experience big triggers, distrust in God, distrust in ourselves, shame, just different things that have come up. And I think we're wanting to address the emotions behind that. We're wanting to address our relationship with God in that. And we're also wanting to really get wise in the way we practically steward our finances. And, I think in the process, I'm like, who's the best person that I can invite on to facilitate that discussion with you guys as well, who are listening to or watching this podcast. And I know a lot of you guys trust me around the entrepreneurial conversation, starting a life coaching business and things like that. But around the personal finance discussion, I really do feel like I don't know anything, and call it my, one of my weaknesses. And so I wanted to have Jim Baker on. And so we're going to have just a discussion. I want to dive into his story. I want to ask him a bunch of questions that I feel like I really care about. And hopefully it's a discussion that either prompts you to take action in your own life, or it's a discussion that just enlightens you maybe to some of the nature, like some of the nature of God that maybe you were unaware of, and also maybe some of what God has for you that you have access to that you didn't know too. And I think, experience always starts with revelation. And so I really wanted to have this conversation with Jim. So Jim, first of all, thanks for being here. I appreciate you taking more time out of your day besides the free training you did with all of our people yesterday. Thanks for having another conversation.
Well, hey, I'm enjoying getting to know you guys, you and Sammi. I texted your buddy Nicholas. I said, those two are easy to love. I said, I can see why you guys are great friends. And so, it's an honor to be here. I love that you guys are sharing your story. One of the tough thing about money is it is an emotional thing. And sometimes people let their identity get caught up in their money, and it feels so personal. And as Christians, it almost feels like the most difficult thing. Right? But it's interesting from Jesus' perspective. I think this is one of the reasons why so many Christians struggle with money is you look at Luke chapter 16. And so Jesus says, it's the parable of the unjust steward, and he makes this statement, if you can't trust God for that which is least, you cannot trust him for that which is greater. And in the context, that which is least is finances. So he's literally saying the least use of your faith is finances. And it's like kindergarten is the spirit. Money is the kindergarten of the spiritual life, right? And you don't get to skip grades. And so I think so many times we've blown it up and we made it like this. It's this most massive thing. But I want you. Let's flip it around. If we can learn to trust God in the finances, then we can be trusted with the greater, right? And so I think that it's like it's almost like if you can't do math, you can't do non-Euclidean geometry. If you can't do like basic arithmetic, addition and subtraction, you're not going to be able to do non-Euclidean geometry, which is theoretical mathematics. If you can't do 2 push-ups, you're not going to be able to bench press 600 pounds, right? And God, he's wanting to put more weight in the bar for us. He wants to, we were created to rule. Genesis 1:26, let us make man in our image, in our likeness, let them rule. Let them have dominion. Let them take responsibility for the earth. And so that's actually why we were here on the planet, is to co-rule it with God, as he's getting us back to that. And it's interesting that finances is like step one.
Yeah.
And so I think that's why the enemy fights so hard against it. is one of those things. Because if we can get that one right, see, that's why I'm so passionate. I mean, finances are great, getting people free, freeing up their time, being able to use your money as a tool for impact, influence, changing lives with it. We love all that, absolutely. But what excites me too is, man, if we can get them to trust Dad, capital D, with finances, then man, we can be trusted with the true riches. Earthly riches, you can buy a man a meal. Heavenly riches, you can multiply one meal to feed 5,000.
Yeah.
We're after those true riches. So.
And I apologize, guys. I literally just told Jim before we started the podcast, we have like volcanic
You took
fog.
up smoking again, didn't you?
Yeah, Marlboro Reds, all for the win.
Yeah.
We have like volcanic fog from Big Island sweeping across Maui right now. We took a walk with my parents who were visiting yesterday, and I'm like, I've had like 3 asthma attacks, and I sound like Macy Gray right now on the podcast.
You're ready to get that old COVID mask back out. That's what you're ready to do.
I'm ready to sing some Louis Armstrong at a jazz, a jazz
that's
bar
right.
or something. I love all of that, and honestly, like I was on my walk yesterday with Sammi and my parents, and to be vulnerable, my parents are like, "How are you doing?" And I'm like, "I'm stressed. Like we have an expensive home that we're trying to sell right now, and." We've had like different, I just folded a business last week with my brother that we had a lot of expectation behind, but the model just wasn't right. And so we were like, I think we have to end it. It's one of those tough decisions you just have to make as a business owner of like, this is not the right model. I have to end it. And we literally like fired some of our clients that were, some of them bringing in up to 10 grand a month. And it was a difficult decision. I'm just like, I'm stressed and I don't know how to trust God in some of this. And hearing you was such a refreshing, I think it was very refreshing for me to hear you, because I'm like, if I'm being honest with myself, I don't fully know how to trust God with finances. And I guess like, when do you feel like you got to that point in your personal life where you felt like, because you have all the scripture, you have all the teaching, you have all the, it's like you taught a killer message yesterday that had like 1,000 one-liners. But like for you, there had to be an epiphany where there was a moment where you're like, I trust God with my finances. Was there like a moment? Can you share more about like what that looked like for you?
Well, I think with anyone's journey, there's moments and then there's walking out the moments, right? It's like you go to youth camp, you encounter God, you still got to walk it out, right?
Yeah.
And so, I think there's lots of those moments. You learn a lot in failure, and the thing is, Spencer, just to speak to you for a second. So you've had successful businesses, you've had some things maybe go the way you didn't think, market has changed, employees, blah, blah, blah. But, you're becoming different, and what I found when, we went through a bankruptcy in 2007, we were rocking and rolling in a real estate business and employees and speaking on stage at gurus conferences, and our quotes were on t-shirts, actually had our quotes on t-shirts, all this stuff. And, and when we lost it all in the downturn of 2007 through a lot of stupidity on our part, not knowing how to manage risk. We did everything wrong. It wasn't just the economy. We were destined to fail. I tell you what, though, it changed me to have such a great compassion, And let me, if you don't mind, I'll just kind of share again about the compost pile.
Please.
But it doesn't make any sense. Like, it didn't fit my theology. I understand. Like, I did a whole bunch of stuff wrong at the time. I'm like, God, as far as I know, I've given you everything. Like, I'm not holding anything back. And the business failed. It didn't fit my theology. It still doesn't. I don't understand what happened. I do, but anyway. So, but here I am now. I've got a business called Wealth with God. We're serving people. I've got such a greater compassion for people who are down and out, right? Like, I've been there where, you're getting government assistance to get food, the WIC, Women, Infant, and Children program, and they're checking your kids for bruises because they think that if you're poor, you must be beating your kids, right? I mean, I've been in those lines, and it's humbling. And so now when I'm serving students and, I'm different now, I've got a greater level of compassion. And so I was telling you guys this. I mean, I hadn't planned on it yesterday. Your audience is just like hungry. They're pulling stuff out of me. Like I never tell these stories hardly. And so, if you know anything about organic gardening, the secret sauce of organic gardening is the soil, right? The rich soil.
Yeah.
And how do you make it? There's something called composting. And composting is disgusting. I mean, you take the smelliest, stinkingest, rottingest garbage from the kitchen and you stick it in a bucket, right? Or you stick it in a garbage pail and with the clippings and everything else. And there's a little combustion fire that gets in and you turn it over and it continues to do this process until it becomes the richest soil. And I was talking about how God, he's the most amazing person. He can win with any hand. It doesn't say all things work together for good. It says in all things. All things aren't good, but in all things he can work, even in those manure piles of our life. And so God has a compost pile for your life. And if you will put it in his compost pile and say, God, I don't understand why this is going on. I don't understand why this business failed. I don't understand why I can't get any traction. I don't understand why I'm not married. I don't understand why. If you take it and put it in there, one of my favorite phrases in Ephesians, it says he has manifold wisdom. Here's what that means. It means he has a trillion ways to get your plan. When he had a plan for your life, your stupidity was already factored into it. He wasn't like, hold on, this is plan A for big. Listen, he only has plan A. Yeah. So you live in Hawaii. So let's say I was going to take a plane from Columbus to Hawaii and I had to stop in LA. Okay, now imagine I'm in the LA airport waiting for my connecting flight. And let me just reverse it. Let's just make it a little bit easier. So I went and visited Spencer at his house. I'm like, this is amazing. This is going to be great when you sell it. And I'm flying home. I'm over in LA waiting to go to Columbus. And I get a little distracted, in my layover. And I'm like, oh, there's a massage chair. Boy, my back is sore. I'm going to go get a massage. And I'm eating. And then I notice, oh, my goodness, the flight has left. I missed my connecting flight. And I begin to weep bitterly in the airport. I'm never going to be able to get home. I missed my flight. What am I going to do? That would be so stupid. There's another flight that will get me there. Now, I may have some different people along the way than I would have. I'm still going to get to the same destination. It might just take me a little bit longer, right? Guys, when you miss, God only has plan A for you. There is no plan B. There's the perfect will and the permissive will. Find me that in the scriptures. There is plan A for your life. He had your stupidity factored into it. And whatever you do wrong, there's another flight coming along. Now, it may be with some different people, but you're still going to get to that same destination. So I just want to encourage some people with that. Like, I don't care. Your financial past does not prophesy your financial future. God's promises prophesy your financial future. Spencer, if you were to, I'm just going to say some stuff here. If you were to bring a witch onto your audience right now, and they were to pronounce a curse over their finances, there's a lot of people who would put more weight on that curse than on God's promises of blessing.
Yeah.
Deuteronomy 28 says God has already commanded a blessing over your finances. People are like, that's the Old Testament. Oh, you should be encouraged. Oh, those promises were to Israel. Yeah, and you are grafted into that tree of Israel's promises. And it says not only do we get, it says we have a better covenant with better promises. So whatever Israel got, now you get them on the inside and the outside. You get them spiritually and physically. So like, oh, that was for Israel. Thank God. I've been grafted into that. He commanded, Deuteronomy 28, he says he's already commanded a blessing over your finances. A blessing is stronger than any curse. The only thing that can stop the commanded blessing of God over your finances, I mean, he's saying, I'm going to bless your barns. I'm going to bless you when you go in. I'm going to bless you go out. I'm going to bless your kneading bowl in the kitchen. You got to figure it's an agrarian society. So today it'd be like, I'm going to bless your savings account. I'm going to bless your job. I'm going to bless your investments.
Right.
It is like everything that you put your hand to, it will prosper, he goes on to say. And so the only thing that can stop that is unbelief. And so our negative, okay, someone get this, your negative emotions are simply the alarm clock that you're in unbelief or the flesh. The flesh is your life apart from divine influence. So I used to have a little sticky note on my monitor in front of me, and it had just simply this question: whose strength am I doing this in? Now, it wasn't delayed guilt. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm doing this in my own strength. It was just simply, because what I found is when I miss moments with the Lord, there's another one coming right there, and I can turn my attention towards him. I can breathe in and say, Lord, I thank you that you're here with me.
Yeah.
See, that's the good news of the kingdom, is that the kingdom is at hand. It's as close as the air that you breathe. Jesus is the way in, and you repent by getting into it. And so to get into it, and so repentance means I'm going to think the same thoughts about me that God's thinking about me. Right? I get it. There's a turning from and a turning to, but Guys, if you've been blowing it, if you've been stressed out, if you've been anxious, if you've been doing all these other things, which, guys, we have all done that, man, there's another wave you can catch right now by just, some of you guys, why don't you just take a deep breath and just say, Lord, I just thank you that you're right here with me. You've got 1 trillion ways to get me into my destiny. So, Lord, I'm sticking this hot mess of my past in the compost pile. And Lord, I'm believing that you've got 1 trillion ways to turn it for your good. That in all things, you work it together for your good. Boy, that's some good news for somebody right there. So I didn't mean to get off on all that. I don't think I've ever said that on a podcast before. But I think there's been lots of those moments where I've had to put it in the compost pile, and I've blown it, and I've done stupid things with money. I mean, every time I made an investment that my wife didn't agree with, we lost every penny. I mean, you think after like 3 or 4 of those, I'd be like, my lightning fast mind would catch on, like, maybe. But see, I read a lot on finances. I've taken lots of courses, done lots of different kinds of investing, and so, from my head, I'm arguing with her, not realizing that she doesn't have all the intellectual arguments, but she has a spiritual discernment to know this is wrong. And so, I feel like that's, guys, I tell you what. Even if those investments would have gone right, it's not worth disagreement with your spouse.
That's really good. I feel like there's a whole discussion inside of just that right there.
There is. Yeah, there's a lesson in my course on it. It's called the due diligence diamond. You want the 60-second version? You want the 60-second version?
60 seconds. Give it to me.
Okay, so when you went shopping for your wife with for her diamond ring, you probably went to the diamond store and they got those special diamond lights. Like they look more spectacular than they've ever looked, right? So you hold up the diamond to the light, and then it just refracts out different beauty. So here's the diamond that you hold up to the light of His presence. So it's not like God's one step in the process. These are the 4 points you hold up to Him, and when you're going to have an investment. So number 1 is, do I feel peace about it? Man, if you're not feeling the approval of the Lord on it, this is why you're even going. Number 2 is agreement with spouse.
Can I pause on that, Jim? So,
yes.
What's the difference between feeling peace on something and feeling fear? Because sometimes I've noticed I'm still scared, but there's a peace that I feel as well while I'm scared. And some people I've noticed are waiting for the fear to go away to identify it as peace. So, how do you differentiate?
Fear often masquerades as wisdom.
Yep.
And so a lot of people will say things like this, like even joining a course, they'll be like, whatever it might be, I'm afraid. So your comfort will not come from your circumstances when you're following God. That's why He gave you the Holy Spirit called the Comforter, because you're going to be uncomfortable all the time. Your only comfort is going to be that I will be with you and God is yes in this. So Spencer, I don't know if maybe this term means something to you. Scary, wonderful. It's you know what I'm saying? Yeah. It's never like, oh, I'm so chill. It's like I'm on a beach. It's like I don't look at peace that way. I look at it's a scary, wonderful. It's like, God, this is going to take faith. I'm going on an adventure with you. My wife's got the second part of the diamond is agreement with spouse. My wife's got a green light. I've got a green light. And if you go through these 4 points, just act and don't look back. But when you're looking for that peace, sometimes you just don't know what to do. So here's what my process looks like. We're going past the 60 seconds.
It's my fault. My fault.
Yeah. I'm the victim here. I'm the victim. and so, let's say I got to make a decision in 7 days. And so I'll be, okay, it's like I've researched it here. I've got my best, I've consulted wise people. That's the third point of the diamond. I'll review the diamond here in a second. And I'll be like, okay, Lord, I'm planning on making this decision to go ahead and invest in this piece of property. Lord, if you don't want me to do it, please disturb the peace. Like, send a clear message. I don't care if it's a bumper sticker on the back of a truck that says, Jim, don't buy. Like whatever it has to be. Like you can speak to me through a movie. You can speak to me through my enemies. You can speak to me through Scripture. And so I'll be like, okay, Lord. And so now I'm actively looking for Him to contradict it. So I'm like, you just get that feeling like something's not right here. There's a difference between something's not right and scary, wonderful. Like, yeah. Oh my gosh, I think God's in this. I'm kind of nervous. And so if I don't feel anything, I'm going to make the decision with the best information I have. A bad decision in faith is better than a good decision in fear.
I know where that comes from.
That's from Steve Backlund. Yes, it is. And why is that? Because fear introduces a whole different kind of spirit.
Yeah.
Right. Fear is you're walking on a path you're walking away from the Lord. He's not walking away from you.
Yeah.
And so yeah. So you got that peace of the Lord.
Yep.
That scary, wonderful. You got the agreement with the spouse. Let me just hit the spouse thing real quick. What happens oftentimes? So remember the Old Testament? They had kings and priests.
Yeah.
Right. So kings are about affluence, influence, domination, goals, new territory. Right. You're a king. I can tell already. Right. And so they often marry a priest. What are priests? They're about the presence of God and angels and glory realms and prophetic words and dreams. And it's like what happens oftentimes is they get married to one another.
Yeah.
Right. And so then,
Funny.
so what was happening is I'm a king, my wife's a priest. Like, here's a funny thing. We're on vacation, and we each brought a book on vacation. Hers was called Moving in Glory Realms. You couldn't put a gun to my head and have me read Moving in Glory Realms. My book was called All About Asset Allocation. I'm like, this is our marriage right here. All right.
Literally, the book that I bought for one of our vacations was Buy Then Build. And I think
Yeah. And she's reading like how to hear God's voice more clearly. Yeah. And so what happened is me as the king was not honoring her as a priest. See, here's the good thing. And the new covenant, we get to be both. We get to be a kingdom of priests. We get, So I'm learning to be a priestly king, and she's learning to be a kingly priest. But there was a dishonoring, and she's saying, "Why can't you pray more? Why can't you do this more?" I'm like, if I laid on my face and prayed as much as you did, I get nothing done. That's why I'm not,
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm praying as I'm doing stuff, right? And so there wasn't an honoring, and so I was making decisions, not honoring her discernment, and we lost money every single time. Unfortunately, we had like 3 or 4 prophets come into our church. Literally, the only prophetic word they gave me were, "Jim, you need to listen to your wife more." I'm like, seriously, that's the only word she's ever going to remember. And so you got the peace of the Lord, agreement with your spouse, and so we use a red light, yellow light, green light system for that.
Sure.
And so if we both get green lights, we move on. We do the other parts of the diamond. Remember, we're holding this up to the presence of God. All of these things, If she's got a red light, I've got a strong green light, which happens oftentimes. Hey, let's take a week or two, and let's just see. And if she doesn't move to a light yellow or a green, we don't do it. I don't try to convince her into it. So peace of the Lord, agreement with spouse, wisdom and a multitude of counselors. How many is a multitude? More than one. And you want to get, the wise counsel, is the third point of diamond. Proverbs talks about there's wisdom and a multitude of counselors. So more than one. And you want to get it from the best, someone who knows what they're doing in that, right? Like, you're not going to get bodybuilding advice from me. Like, it's just obvious. Like, you're not going to be like, "Baker, how do I get legs like yours?" I'm like, you make declarations you're going to be the chicken, like I get the chicken legs like me, right? And then the third part is the actual due diligence process. Due diligence is like a unicorn. A lot of people think they know what it is, but they've actually never seen one. And so it's things like, do you understand this investment? What are all the ways you can lose money in this investment? Who are the principals involved in the investment? Does this fit with your skill set, calling, all those type of things in there. So there's 7 questions. I can't pull them up in my brain right now. But that is, I don't know how we got into all that.
Well, no, I was asking you, how do you make those decisions with, in the midst of fear, and then also with a spouse that's maybe not fully on board.
And so if we've done that, and I'm not feeling a like Lord, here's what I'm planning on doing, and if I don't feel a disturbance in the force, to use that language, we make the decision. We don't look back, and if it goes bad, we don't beat ourselves up. It's like Lord, we are honoring you in this whole process, and things have gone well since we've done that.
It's interesting. I have friends and family that are so convinced they heard God say something, and then when it doesn't happen, they get mad at God.
Yeah, or they try to justify it. Well, it happened spiritually, but not physically. I'm like, no, it didn't.
Here's the thing. I have friends that hear God so clearly that they will go, like you'd mentioned it for your church, they'll go to the ER and they'll get words of knowledge in the middle of the ER. They'll pray, "God, tell me what people's physical conditions are that you want me to pray for here in the emergency room." And he'll share, word for word, what's going on in their bodies and blah, blah, blah. And they still get things wrong. They still will not hear God 100% correctly. And then,
well, have you ever heard of Go ahead. Keep going.
All I was gonna say is that, and then I have other friends that will never do that, and I'm not judging them for it. I'm just saying it's like they won't do that. They won't pray for people in the streets. They don't get words of knowledge for anything else besides what they care most about in their own life. So I heard God say, this was the spouse I was supposed to marry. Or I heard God say, this is what I was supposed to do with our finances. Or I heard God say, this is what we're supposed to do with moving to this place.
God's telling them amazingly the things they already wanted to do. It's incredible, right?
Yeah. It's like flip a coin. Okay. Yeah. It lands in your hand. What do you wish it landed on?
Yeah.
And
that's dangerous.
I hear those things and I'm like, you're mad at God because you may not hear him though. You have only demanded of him to speak clearly in the things you care most about. And how do you judge that? Like, I know plenty of people that still get it wrong, but because they pray for people in the streets all day, every day, and they get things wrong, they know they don't get it right every time. So they don't judge God or blame him when they misheard him, and when their own desires led them somewhere.
It's so good. Yeah, I think so. Divine guidance only makes sense in the context of a life where you're walking with him. Like, and I'm not talking about like you got it perfect, this and that, but like my heart is for you, God. I want to please you. I'm checking in with you. I'm living, I'm learning to live this life with you, right? So like divine guidance outside, it doesn't make any sense from someone who's like doing their own thing, trying to punch the God card out of duty every once in a while, and then that's. And if you're not willing to take major life decision words to people who you trust that hear God and submit to them, your life's probably not going to go too well. There's a prophet named Bob Jones. I mean, he's like having heavenly encounters and Jesus is visiting him and all sorts of stuff, like ridiculously, like predicting earthquakes. He's I don't know if you read the book by Mike Bickle on the prophetic, but the first time he met Bob Jones said, I called him up and said, I want to meet with you. You pick the day that I come and you pick the day that I leave. There'll be an earthquake on both days. I'm like, that's how you separate the big boy prophets from the little boy prophets, right? Bob Jones, he heard it super clear, but he had a saying, and he said, I hear God right about 70% of the time. The problem is I don't know which 70 it is. And the people that I like that kind of humility. You know what I'm saying? It's like, yeah, I can hear it, and sometimes I miss it, and I don't know. And the people that I know that hear God's voice clearly, they don't have to tell God, every single step. Well, then God said, put on the left sock. And I was like, yes, Father. What should I do next? And it's like they have this ridiculous string of like, what are you talking about? Like,
well, I notice like when people pull on God for decision making, it's usually with the things that they care most about and feel the most fear around. And so like we don't like implore God's guidance, or we don't ask for his guidance when we're putting on clothing in the morning. Why? I can do that myself. I don't need to know which shirt to put on. If God randomly told me like, you need to wear, a corduroy jacket today, then it's like, oh, okay, God, I don't know what that was, but I guess I'm going to wear a corduroy jacket today. Yeah. It could feel really odd in Hawaii, very uncomfortable, but it's like, we don't do that. It's only around like, oh, you're asking me to do something uncomfortable? Let me talk to the Lord about it. And my wife talks about this too in her story. They would ask for things like school supplies or different things in their lives, and they would always get a response from their dad. Well, let me pray about it. And they would either not hear a response, or he'd be like, God didn't tell me anything. And so they would end up with a lot of lack. And so she ended up with a lot of pain around that type of process. Now, he might have actually had the intention of bringing it to the Lord. He might have had his own fear around finances, but I see the whole like process itself as faulty. And I see that with a lot of people where they're like, they almost want to take the agency and responsibility off of themselves to make scary decisions in their lives and put it on God. As soon as God tells me, yes. But what they're really saying is, he better come out with a freaking parade to show me that this is where he's at. Otherwise, I'm not going to do it. And I'm going to live in the comfortable. I'm going to live in the normal of what I'm used to. And I guess like when people are showing up that way, what's the main thing you feel like they need to consider, maybe confront within their lives to find any type of breakthrough in those areas?
I just come back to it's divine guidance only makes sense in a life that's walking carefully before Him.
Yeah.
And so if you're only consulting Him on these things, I mean, we all know people like that. Nobody wants to be that guy. Nobody wants to be weird. No one wants to be, there's that. And, but there's nobody that you and I respect in the Lord that doesn't hear from the Lord.
Yeah.
And the great thing about Scripture is literally everything about you, your body, soul, spirit, was designed to be able to encounter the Lord. Hebrews 5 even says that your senses can be your senses can be trained to discern between good and evil. Like your physical senses, you can literally. So there's people who they smell, and it's like they can discern what kind of spirits are happening and those type of things, and things that I definitely haven't done. But so anyone who's listening to this, I would want them to walk away with, like, God's like in Revelation, He's like, come to me. He's like, that I may sit and sup with you. He's talking about like the evening meal where it was long, reclining, friends talking and relaxing. Like all the pictures of the Lord is like He wants to talk with you. And so just because we may not be, you may not be, I may not be, we may not be great at it, doesn't mean that we can't get better and better at it.
Yeah.
I think it's like learning any new language. The reason kids learn languages so quickly, so part of it is their way their brains develop. Part of it, they're not afraid to make mistakes. They're not afraid to pronounce something wrong. Mary and I are getting ready to go to Italy, and
nice.
I'm gonna be embarrassed trying to pronounce some of these words in front of those Italians. I'm just imagining laughter. Maybe they'll write a song about me. How about this stupid American? And I don't know. And but kids, they don't do that. And so Jesus is like, hey, unless you become like a little child. Now that can mean a lot of different things. But I think one of it is that there's, everything's an adventure to them.
Yeah.
And so I would just, I don't know. If anyone's sitting here listening to this, driving, listening to this, whatever, and God wants to talk to you. You were designed for it. And I would imagine you're already hearing from the Lord more than you think. It's just you think that it's your thoughts.
Yeah.
But when you got born again, your spirit and His spirit, 1 Corinthians 6:17, became one spirit. And so you now have the mind of Christ. And so in one sense, I'm going to say this tongue in cheek, if you want to hear God's voice, have some thoughts.
Yeah.
Your thoughts and His thoughts are going to sound, people are waiting for this King James Earl Jones, Darth Vader voice, and then they're going to know it's the Lord. When they had a thought. And then it's like, hi, I hadn't thought about that person in a while. And then 2 minutes later, that person calls. And it's like, wow, man, I should have called them. Or they were going through a hard time. I should have called them. And we just shrug it off as just us.
Yeah.
But just us is united to God. And so I just encourage people. I bet you're hearing more than you think. But when you hear from the Lord, there's going to be a freshness to it. A lot of times it comes out of the blue. Like, I'm not trying to think about it. It just comes to me. And try this if you're having trouble hearing. Engage with your hands, something that doesn't require a lot of brain power. And there's something about my hands are engaged. I'm drying the dishes. I'm gardening. I'm polishing something. I'm maybe doing some woodworking that isn't so intricate or something. Waxing the car, mowing the lawn. There's just something about your hands are engaged that doesn't require, like, you're not performing surgery, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But, there's like your hands are engaged. It doesn't require a lot of brain power. I don't know if you've experienced this, Spencer. It's like you can just kind of hear from the Lord a little bit better. There's just something about it just opens that up. So maybe experiment with that if you're having trouble hearing. I bet you already are, and that can help you recognize it.
Well, one of the things that we kind of talk about with our audience and in our courses and programs and stuff, and something I've had to face myself, is that we really like to busy ourselves. We don't like to be alone with our thoughts. And I feel like we're constantly medicating ourselves with the next thing. And usually in our generation, that's stimulation through YouTube, Instagram, Facebook for hours a day, or Netflix and all those things.
Yeah.
And I notice, like, I hear God a lot more clearly when I actually remove those things from my life. And it's like, why? Because those things are evil? It's like, no. Like, I have watched movies where I'm like, God's speaking to me in the middle of the movie or whatever. It's not about that. It's not about a religious lens around it. It's more about, like, no, is this actually, am I using this thing as in a medicative sense? And am I medicating myself from being present with God? And sometimes I've noticed, like, when you're doing something with your hands, like what you just said, it takes your mind out of that busyness and stimulation, and you're almost able to go like, oh, I'm alone with my mind. I'm alone with my heart.
Yeah.
What's surfacing right now? Oh, all the stuff that I was ignoring and pushing off to the side. And
That's so good. Yeah.
yeah, I noticed like a lot of us, we just need to have that margin. Like we build our lives to remove margin instead of embrace it. And I think that can get us into a lot of problems personally. I've noticed for me.
Yeah. I think that numbing, or however you describe that, I really like that language you were using, is we're so afraid of the silence that what if I ask God something and I don't hear anything?
Yeah.
And so I just wouldn't be afraid of that. I don't know about you, like it feels like a lot of times God answers me at the worst moments. Like I'll talk, I'll ask questions, and it feels like that kind of primes the pump. A lot of times it's not like, okay, I'm getting like like ask a question, get an answer. Sometimes I feel like I get a little bit more of a dialogue, but don't be afraid to ask a question. And seeking is not just how you get into the kingdom, it's the lifestyle inside of the kingdom. There's something about seeking that shapes us to become the kind of person who can carry the weight of the answer.
Yeah.
So when God's answers are delayed, they're never punishment, okay? Jesus took care of the whole punishment thing. His answers are delayed because sometimes his answers require character. And so just enjoy like if there's a delay, it's for your own good. It's going to be so good. I like to look at it like this. Those delayed answers are just gaining interest. I'm like, oh man, when this answer comes, it's going to have more interest than when I started. It's going to be so good. So let's encourage people. Don't be afraid of the silence. It could just be that he's shaping you for the answer. There's something about exercising those seeking muscles that make me have that weight-bearing capacity when the answer comes.
I had a non-believing mentor in business that once said, patience is what you do in the waiting. And it was like, why are you spitting truth right now?
Right.
Like, but
you can still talk through donkeys, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I'm like, that's so good. It's like, it's not just the waiting. It's what you do in the waiting, and how can you occupy yourself in the waiting. And I just found that so good. I guess, some of the things I'm thinking about in this conversation is like, it's like patience is so difficult for so much of humanity. Like every time I talk to people, like if I consider in my life, it's like waiting is so excruciating because I am waiting for sometimes the other shoe to drop. And I think sometimes it reveals my perspective of God more than anything. It's not even about like what the thing is anymore. It's more of a revealing of like, what's my belief system around myself and around God? And am I willing to face those things? Because sometimes those thoughts in themselves can be punishing. And that's scary. That's scary to have to look at. I guess like for you, Jim, your whole brand recently has become, especially in business. I'm not saying in your church that's all you talk about as a pastor, but
in 16 years I've talked about money in 2 series. That's it.
Yeah. So
we don't. It's not all we talk about. Yeah, we talk about Jesus every week. So,
but obviously in your business, it's something you're passionate about, and I guess like why? Honestly, when I look at the scripture too, Jesus talked about money almost more than anything else. It seemed like when I was looking at like, okay, how many times was faith mentioned? How many times was money mentioned? How many times was love mentioned? Money almost always gets
love's mentioned twice.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is the love God and the love neighbor. That was the time it's mentioned, and it's mentioned in multiple gospels, but it's one instance. Yeah, it's the point of 16 out of 38 parables. That should tell you something. He talks about money more than heaven, hell, love combined, and faith. It's like, wow. It's like that's a lot. And so, there's an old saying that, a person's heart is attached to their wallet, right? And so it's like if the Lord can get your wallet, he can get your heart. And that's that kindergarten of the spiritual life thing again. It's like, man, if we can just trust him for that which is seen. Yeah. And, so I'm really passionate about it. I feel it. This may sound lofty, but I felt like the Lord handed me an assignment years ago. I remember right where I was. and to help redefine normal Christianity. I'm not going to do it all by myself.
Yeah.
I'm just one voice in the choir, but I want to sing my part well. To help redefine normal Christianity as prosperity with purpose and power with purity. And so healing and finances, I mean, I got the name Jim Baker. I'm a different Jim Baker than the guy who went to jail. I like to say I'm Jim Baker with 1K and no Tammy Faye. But and I bless him. He's doing, he's repented. He's a brother. Great. I love it. Love it. But, going after healing and finance with the name Jim Baker, let's just say the Facebook comments haven't been kind. And, yeah. And so, so I think that's, I actually lost track of the question. I started the carnivore diet yesterday, and my brain's like, where are the carbs at, bro?
That carnivore diet's honestly no joke. Like, years ago I did that too, and it's the transition of all your microbiome in your gut, like shifting your enzymes and everything to break down different stuff. Your brain
I'm just doing
messed.
it for 60 days. I'm just doing it to reset some stuff. My health, my eating's already super dialed in. My supplements are super dialed in. My exercise is super dialed in.
Yeah. Are you doing like heart and soil supplements? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Paul Saladino stuff is what you're doing, or?
Yeah. I mean, he's not even doing the full carnivore anymore.
Right.
So,
he's on honey, and he's like doing fruits and things like that. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm just I had some parasites from a missions trip, and it just destroyed my gut, and so I've just been working through some of that. Got rid of all the parasites, but still got some inflammation. And I know it's not from lack of supplements. Trust me, I'm killing it on those. I've got the most expensive urine of anyone in our family, and I don't eat sugar or gluten. I haven't done that for months, and so it's like, okay, I feel like that if that was it, it would have done it. And so I did a cleanse. Still feeling the inflammation stuff. So I'm like, all right, I'll try. I'm gonna do my own diet, carnivore and cabbage.
Oh my gosh!
I told my friend, he's like, I've never heard of that. I'm like, because no one's ever done it. It's so stupid. But I've read all the stuff about how cabbage it heals your gut and blah blah blah. It's got vitamin U, which I didn't even know that was a vitamin. So anyway, we're trying it.
Been through it all. Lost 100 pounds in high school, and
did you really?
Yeah, and
Nicholas was chunky too.
Yeah, no, I remember it was like a big part of like our bonding and stuff was that we both had lost a ton of weight.
That's so cool. I love it.
Super fun. I guess like when you look at like the Dave Ramsey courses that are out there, and you see, there's already so much financial financial literacy like training that's out there for Christians, for instance. Why do you feel like more is needed? I guess like when you see something like that that's out there, like I have my own personal instincts and beliefs of why more is needed when I see a Dave Ramsey course or when I've seen other people go through it. But I'm curious, like, what was the thing that gave you conviction where like, I need to jump into this? There's more that's needed here, and I feel like there are missing gaps.
Yeah, I think Dave Ramsey's an absolute gift. I actually think he has a catalytic anointing on his life to get people out of debt. Yeah. And so I'm super thankful for that. I think Dave's his secret sauce is getting people out of debt. It's not helping them build wealth. Now Dave Ramsey's a raging believer. I think he's a good guy, but all of his stuff is meant to be done without the Lord. Like there's nothing that's written, and my stuff is meant to. It's only going to work if God's in it. Yeah. It's literally designed like that. So we're not trying to get you success without the Lord. Now, could somebody take the investing part of my course and do well with it? Probably. I mean, there's timeless biblical truths and there's proven financial principles. We include both of those things in there. Like you're not going to find anything about tactical asset allocation in the Old or New Testament. But there's principles actually from Ecclesiastes about investing that actually are covered in these things. And so I think that Dave doesn't really cover. He doesn't cover the heart and mindset stuff at all. I think that if you do his stuff long enough, it will give you a poverty mentality. Yeah. What I mean by that is that rice and beans, live on nothing, and the gazelle intensity. Like I appreciate that, and there's a certain subset that's exactly what they need. If your spending's out of control, you may need that chiropractic adjustment for that short term. And so don't hear me saying anything negative about it. But if I went on his forum one time and it was like, people like, swapping like recipes for like how to add oatmeal to beef to make it go longer. And it was all this frugality stuff. And, there's some people that find life from that. So I'm not trying to make light of it at all, but I feel like a lot of times they're stepping over dollars to pick up pennies.
Yeah.
And so I think that there's something, if you're just so focused on reducing expenses, that people need to reduce some of their expenses. And this isn't Dave Ramsey's fault. I'm just saying that if people continue on with that mentality, it can create a real scarcity mentality where you're just focused on lack and trying to avoid lack. So what I like to focus on is let's manage your expenses. Let's find out what is every dollar that comes into your life, the Bible says, is either bread or seed. Bread is for the now. It's an acronym. Your needs, your obligations, some of your wants. Seed is for your future harvest. I believe seed involves your giving, which opens up the windows of heaven. But if you don't have anything planted on earth, there's nothing for the rain to fall upon so it can multiply and increase. So you got a lot of Christians who are tithing, but they haven't given God anything to bless. They don't have anything invested on earth. So I believe your seed is giving and investing. I got a whole lesson on that thing. But so yes, I think so. Dave, he's got a very awesome niche, or however you say it.
Sure.
I don't know if there's anyone better at getting people to out of debt, like on a national scale. I mean, he's the man. But I do it a little bit differently. I focus on changing people on the inside, and it'll manifest on the outside by raising awareness around their spending. We're finding people are able to reduce their expenses without deprivation or scarcity, which is a big key. I think that some of his stuff that he used to have on mutual funds and safe withdrawal rates, with an average of 12%, with a safe withdrawal rate of 8%, I don't know that he's still saying that because it's so far off and so dangerous to think that you can have 8% withdrawal rate from a mutual fund averaging 12%. Like if you just understood the math behind that. So I don't know. I'm just, in all fairness, I don't know that he is still saying that, but that kind of stuff. And the way he built wealth isn't how he teaches it. So I feel like it's a little bit disingenuous. It's like, you got the 7 baby steps, but I think from a marketing standpoint and an educational standpoint, absolutely brilliant. I love that. He's made it simple, but he built his wealth through business and put it into debt-free real estate to diversify his wealth.
Yeah.
And he's telling you to scrimp and save for 40 years and let the magic of compound interest. And if you look at the millionaires on his show, it's like $1 million, $2 million, $3 million. You don't have any 30, 40, $50 million people who are getting rich that way unless they did it in a way that he didn't tell them to.
Yeah.
So if you're going to really make a serious dent in the kingdom, as far as, with outrageous generosity, I'm not sure that his methods are going to work unless you start saving when you're like 3 years old and you're like 80.
Well, I think that's the thing is like, what you did to arrive at a certain goal is not the thing you have to continue doing to get to the next goal. It's like what I did to build a business up to $1 million a year were not the same things I had to do to build the business up to $5 million a year. It's like getting up to $1 million, I had to figure out.
Until you do it, you don't understand it, right? Yeah. Like I knew that going into business, but we hit 1, we hit 5, we hit 10, it was like, oh my gosh, this is, it's so true. It's so true.
Well, you're like up to $1 million a year, for instance, you're wearing all the hats because you can't afford employees really with the margins. And
it was me and my son for our first $2 million. Yeah, it was me and my son.
Yeah, and that's totally normal. So you're like, cool, how can I be the marketer? How can I be the sales guy? How can I be the fulfiller on
I'm writing
all
the
stuff?
Emails. I'm writing,
admin, everything. Then all of a sudden you're like, wait, now I have to figure out how to recruit and then hire and then train people. And I have to figure out how to create SOPs, so like standards of operation, standardized
operating procedures.
Yeah, operating procedures, exactly. And you're like, okay, so I need to then get those down, train those 2 employees. Now I'm a manager of people. Then the business gets big enough, and you're like, now we have to create an entire recruiting arm, and I have to raise up executives that are managing different departments. Then you're like, wait a second. How have I become coach to a team? Yeah. It's just like every stage is so different. When I talk to friends that have like $50 to $100 million a year companies, I'm like, oh, now you're just promoter in a sense. Like all you've become is now just promoter. You look at Elon Musk. What does he do now? All he does is finds the right top people for his team and he promotes. Gets on Joe Rogan, talks about it everywhere he goes, and And his mind is still the same, but he's acquired new skills and everything. And I look at the Dave Ramsey community and I'm like, you've learned the skill of getting out of debt, but that is not the thing that is going to help you acquire wealth. You have to learn new skills. Well, he knows his target audience, and because there's a lot of them. But then you talk to somebody like, I have a friend, his only job is helping to manage funds and wealth of people that have at least a $15 million net worth. And he has clients that are up to a $250 to $500 million net worth.
So it's a family office model.
So he helps build family offices, and then he helps family offices set up the right structures and be able to replace, their active income with passive income based on what their money is making them. Yeah. And you'd know a lot more than I would about that stuff. I know all this stuff in theory.
Well, we see that's actually what we teach at a lower level. Is we teach, my definition of financial freedom is when the income from your investments is greater than your living expenses. So you don't have to ask money for permission to obey God or do what's in your heart.
Yeah.
I believe anybody can do that in 12 to 15 years without God. With God, I believe it can be sped up. So we aim for 10 years or less, and we have them put it in a calculator. Every person who's walked through our course has gone through it, done the steps, put it into a calculator. There's typically a gap to be able to do it in 10 years. We give them 27 different life planning scenarios. It's like trying on 27 different outfits, and some will fit, some won't. Everyone has closed the gap, and now they've got a plan that's customized to them based on timeless biblical truths, proven financial principles, engineered with numbers. Then we teach them how to reverse engineer it into action steps, so wealth becomes a matter of when, not if.
Yeah.
And so it can be done. So we're teaching people how to build wealth in the first place, how to translate that wealth into assets that pay you, and how to pick the ones, there's only 5, that grow faster than inflation. And so inflation is the devil when it comes to it. Actually, the Federal Reserve is the devil, and his sulfur and fire is inflation. And so if your grandfather's dollar was the same dollar that your grandson was going to spend, retirement planning. I don't believe in retirement. There's nothing in the Bible that says work for 40 years and then take the next 20 to just sip something on the beach. The word retire actually means no longer of use. Now the Bible does teach season changes, but there's always going to be a purpose God's had for you, somebody for you to love, somewhere for you to make a difference, somewhere for you to use your influence, somewhere for you to bring heaven to earth. So yeah, boy, we're just going off on a whole bunch of stuff with.
I love it though.
Carnivore brain here.
I think it's so good.
So Ramsey's an absolute gift, but yeah, like you were saying, I like how you phrased that. I hadn't really applied that principle of what got you there won't get you to the next level. But you're right, that debt mentality. But I don't want to hear me saying anything negative about him. I was trying to differentiate what I do from him. I think he has a $300 million a year business. I saw an interview with him, and he was breaking down where the different things come from. I mean, he's an entrepreneur par excellence. And when you're that visible, you're going to get people taking shots at you. I'm not one of those guys. I'm saying, man, thanks for paving the way for believers to be able to even talk about money.
Yeah.
Now, like they're okay with Dave Ramsey talking about money, but if a pastor does it, then all of a sudden, they're going to throw stones. So there's that whole thing. But
well, it's interesting.
So that's how we differentiate what we do. Is we do it with the Lord. It only works with the Lord if you do it our way. And but we think it's better. But we think things can be sped up. But it's about building wealth for the right reasons.
Yeah.
It's not so you can be fat and sassy. It's not so you can brag about what kind of car you drive. God doesn't mind if you have a nice car, but it's hopefully you're more generous than your car,
Yeah. So. Yeah, and I think that's something that we're working on. It's like I want to be able to live so well below our means. I never even had the concept that we would have fluctuations of seasons of our earning potential going up and down. I just thought if I'm here at this age, gosh, where are we going to be at in our 30s, 40s? It's only going to keep going up. It was like the naive belief system. And I'm not saying we're not growing and progressing, but I think that it was
thought it'd be more linear.
It was me. It was my illusion of control. And, I never knew, and we talked about this over the phone one day, I never knew that the iOS updates would drastically change all of our marketing, with Instagram and Facebook ads. I didn't know we'd go from spending $100,000 a month to $250,000 a month within a couple months, because all of the tracking got shot down. I didn't know that there's just all these things. And it's like we accrued $1 million of debt in a year, and I didn't let go of employees because I was like, no, I don't want to let these guys go. They're my responsibility, and we're going to turn things around. Well, then 12 months of that level of codependency, as well as my own naivety around like, that's not the way you solve this problem. The way you solve the problem is getting back down to a ground zero and then moving up from there. It was too risky. Luckily, I'd say luckily, like by the grace of God, we were able to pay off $1 million of debt the following year, but it still set us at like ground level. That could have been $1 million of extra money in our pockets that could have gone towards something else besides, the credit card companies or whoever else. And so all these lessons,
you're going to have a voice to struggling entrepreneurs in a way that you wouldn't have. See, people admire your successes. They can't relate to them.
Yeah.
And so, whenever I told a story about us going through bankruptcy, us, women, infant children, getting the coupons for the cheese and the milk and, checking our kids for bruises and all that type of stuff. People can relate to that. They can go, okay, this guy is real. If I'd have just success upon success upon success, it's like, wow, you're amazing. You're special. You're a unicorn. And so I just want to say, Spencer, guys, like, he's going to use all that. And I know you already know that, but I think you're going to have a bigger voice to struggling entrepreneurs than you think of. And I see that you're going to be putting swords and spears in the hands of champions. It's going to be good. So.
Thank you for that. I appreciate that. Well, I know we're nearing our end of our time, and
did we even talk about money? I don't even know if we got to talk about money.
I don't think we did. But here's the thing, like, we're going through your course and everything. It's almost like it does it a disservice to try and talk for 20 minutes on something that you have literally 50 hours worth of stuff on. It's like, okay, so we could hit on a little of these like little practical things, but all that does, what I've noticed, is it gives people the illusion that they've learned what they need to learn to like change the trajectory of stuff. But it's like, can you become an expert at basketball by getting one lesson from a coach that teaches you how to dribble and lay up? Not really. Is that going to help you maybe for the next week or month or whatever? Sure. But it's not going to revolutionize and transform the way you do things. And I think that's why, it's so important. Anytime I've wanted to truly grow in something, we've gotten coaching, mentorship, leadership in some way, shape, or form. Sammi and I have gone through literally dozens of counselors and life coaches for our marriage and our individual lives because
good for you.
We've needed it. We've just
needed to go farther faster.
Yeah, I mean, you go further faster. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's the advantage of collapsing time, of going farther faster. And I'm the same way. I mean, I think if I've done anything right, it's been investing in myself. I mean, as a Christian, you think everything should be free. You get some stupid mentality. It's okay to buy a Bible, but to pay for anything else, it's like, what are you talking about? But you realize this is an investment. Like I'm going to go farther faster with this thing. Yeah, it's like I think it's the number one success factor all successful people have in common was coaches and mentors. That blew me away. I would have thought it was been grit, discipline, perseverance, morning routine. No, it wasn't genius. It wasn't talent. It was coaches and mentors. So.
I mean, discipline in the wrong thing will waste your life.
Yeah. Well said.
So it's like you need to have somebody that's showing you the way that's been successful above you. And, I think like millionaires and billionaires, you'll never find them complaining about investments they've made into learning. But poor people, you'll find them complaining all day about it because they believe those people should have made them successful. It's like, no. It's a partnership. It is a partnership. You get to learn from them, but you also have to have that practiced discipline, and you have to be willing to partner with the belief for yourself to actually achieve it. Like you can't do anything without a vision. So you have to see that somebody else has done it. That needs to be partnered with. If they can do it, so can I. Not they're better than me, and so I'll never do that. I think that belief kills people. So there has to be some place where we move out of that orphan mentality into like, if somebody else can do it, so can I. From that place, then I will choose to learn from people, and I don't care what it costs me because it's far greater than where I'm at. And I think that's a tough thing. So I think it's it's great what you're doing. Regardless if we didn't cover much of the financial literacy stuff on the podcast.
Well, let's just put a Bible verse to what you're saying.
Yeah.
I hadn't thought of it in this context before. But Proverbs says, whatever you do, get wisdom.
Yeah.
It's more precious than rubies. Get wisdom. Above all else, get wisdom.
Yeah.
And so that's what we're talking about. There's knowledge, understanding, and wisdom. Specific knowledge, it would be me teaching you how to do due diligence on an investment. Understanding comes from an experience. Wisdom comes from making a whole bunch of mistakes and learning from them, or learning from someone else who's already done that.
Yes.
And I think that the coaches can impart that knowledge, and they can that specific knowledge. They can also impart that wisdom. You got to get the understanding.
Yes. Gosh, that's so good. And just to piggyback on that, when I'm hiring mentors and leaders and people that I do pay because I believe in it, because like, are they going to just take me on for free? How entitled is that? Somebody's just going to like,
can I pick your brain?
Yeah. You're like, you're one of 1,000 people that's asking me this week. You're like, I wish I could, but I don't even have time for my wife and kids right now.
Yeah.
But it is just a weird entitlement. But it's like when I'm selecting somebody, I'm not looking for just their successes. I'm like, have you lost it all? That's who I'm looking for. Like, have you lost it all and you're still an incredible person that I still want to emulate? If you are still a person that I want to model after and you've lost it all, you're somebody I want to listen from, not just your successes. So thanks for everything you shared. I think it's so good. If you guys, I'm going to put a link in the description. I'm promoting the heck out of this because I believe in it. We're doing the course right now. There's over like 40 or 50 hours worth of practical stuff on finances and building wealth as an individual. But there's a lot of training on like actually getting your heart and mind right behind your trust in God and God's involvement in your finances. And so there's not a better course I found out there. If you guys want access to that, I'm putting a link in the podcast description. It's www.wealthwithgod.com/Robbins, Robbins. It's a specific link that you guys can click that's specific to...
We'll give you a discount.
Yeah, we'll give you a discount. Exactly.
And that's called good stewardship.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, we wanted you guys to have access to that, and I do believe in it. I think it would be a great thing to do. And you guys, like I said, you can find that in the description of the YouTube channel or in the actual podcast description itself. But Jim, I appreciate you, man. Thank you for coming on here and sharing your story and stuff. It's super awesome. So thank you.
An honor to be here.
Sweet. Well, thank you guys for listening, and check out the description if you haven't. And as always, like if you guys found this valuable, leave a review. It's super helpful either on the Apple platform or just on YouTube. Subscribe if you want more episodes, and we'll see you on the next one.